The crystalline dome buzzed with the excited chittering of 100 different alien species, all gathered for the monthly spectacle at the Zephyrian Grand Menagerie. Marcus Chen stood in the center of the exhibition pit, his hands pressed against the energy barrier that kept him contained like some exotic animal. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, a former stellar cartographer, was now the main attraction in an alien zoo. "Look at the primitive thing," sneered a tall crystalline, its translucent body refracting the harsh overhead lights. No natural armor, no poison sacs, not even proper claws. How did such a pathetic species ever leave their home world? Marcus had heard variations of this same comment every day for the past 3 months since his capture. The Zephyrians had found him drifting in a damaged escape pod after his research vessel was destroyed by space pirates. Instead of offering aid, they had scanned him, declared him a rare specimen of an uncontacted primitive species, and promptly added him to their collection. A group of young Zephyrians pressed closer to the barrier, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. One of them activated a neural prod, sending a mild but uncomfortable shock through the containment field. Marcus gritted his teeth but refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He had learned that showing fear or pain only encouraged them. "The human doesn't even have proper defensive mechanisms," laughed another spectator, this one resembling a walking cactus with too many arms. "Watch this." It began making loud, threatening noises, expecting Marcus to cower or flee to the back of his enclosure. Instead, Marcus stepped forward and met the creature's gaze directly. His calm, unwavering stare seemed to unnerve the alien, who quickly moved away from the barrier. This small victory brought a slight smile to Marcus's face, though he kept it hidden. The daily humiliation continued as the crowd grew larger. Children of various species were lifted up by their parents to get a better look at the strange, hairless biped. Educational placards around his enclosure described humans as a recently discovered pre-spaceflight species notable for their lack of natural defenses and primitive tool use. The description made no mention of human intelligence, creativity, or the fact that his people had been traveling between stars for over 2 centuries. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus retreated to the small shelter at the back of his enclosure. It was barely large enough for him to lie down, with basic hygiene facilities and a food dispenser that provided bland but nutritionally adequate meals. The walls were transparent aluminum, offering no privacy even during his most vulnerable moments. He pulled out a small piece of metal he had managed to work loose from the food dispenser, along with some fibrous material from his bedding. With practiced movements, he continued working on a project he had been developing for weeks. The Zephyrians thought humans were primitive, but they had underestimated human ingenuity and the ability to create tools from the most basic materials. The evening crowd was beginning to thin when something unusual happened. A disturbance arose near the main entrance to the menagerie. Marcus could hear raised voices and what sounded like an argument between the facility staff and some new arrivals. He moved to the front of his enclosure, trying to get a better view of what was happening. Through the crowd, he caught glimpses of figures that seemed different from the usual visitors. They moved with purpose and authority, causing other patrons to step aside respectfully. The Zephyrian staff appeared nervous, constantly bowing and gesturing apologetically. One figure stood out among the newcomers. Tall and elegant, with russet-colored fur and pointed ears, she carried herself with unmistakable regal bearing. Her golden eyes swept across the various exhibits with what appeared to be disdain. When those eyes fell upon Marcus's enclosure, he felt a strange jolt of recognition, though he was certain he had never seen her before. The Vulpine female approached his exhibit with measured steps, her entourage following at a respectful distance. Unlike the other visitors who gawked and pointed, she studied him with intelligent curiosity. Her gaze was penetrating but not unkind, and Marcus found himself standing straighter under her scrutiny. "This is your prize specimen?" she asked the lead curator, her voice carrying clearly across the space. There was something in her tone that suggested she was far from impressed with what she was seeing. The Zephyrian curator, a nervous creature with far too many tentacles, bobbed anxiously. "Yes, Your Majesty. A genuine human from the Outer Rim territories. Completely primitive, as you can see. No technology, no weapons, barely sentient, really." The Vulpine Queen's ears flicked forward, and Marcus could have sworn he saw irritation flash across her features. She stepped closer to the barrier, close enough that he could see the intelligence burning in her golden eyes. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, predator and prey, though Marcus wasn't entirely certain which was which. "Barely sentient," she repeated softly, though her eyes never left Marcus's face. How fascinating. As she turned to leave, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stepped forward and spoke clearly in standard Galactic, the trade language used throughout this sector of space. "Your Majesty seems more perceptive than your hosts." The entire group froze. The curator's tentacles writhed in shock, and several members of the Queen's entourage reached for weapons. But the Queen herself simply smiled, revealing sharp canine teeth that somehow managed to look both dangerous and amused. "It speaks," she said, turning back to face him fully. "How very interesting indeed." The silence that followed Marcus's words was deafening. The curator's face had turned an alarming shade of purple, his tentacles writhing in what Marcus had learned was extreme distress. Several security guards moved forward, neural prods crackling with energy, but a single raised hand from the Vulpine Queen stopped them in their tracks. "You told me this creature was non-sentient," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. The curator began to stammer an explanation, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Yet it speaks Galactic standard better than half your staff." Marcus watched this exchange with growing interest. The Queen's reaction suggested she was not pleased with being deceived, and her authority was clearly absolute among this group. He decided to press his advantage. "Your Majesty, if I may," Marcus said, stepping forward until he was pressed against the energy barrier. "The Zephyrians have been less than honest about many things. They know very well that humans are a spacefaring species. My vessel's registration and logs would have made that clear when they captured me." The Queen's golden eyes narrowed dangerously, and she turned to fix the curator with a stare that made the alien shrink visibly. "Is this true?" That is..." The curator's voice squeaked higher with each word. "The records were damaged in the recovery process. We made reasonable assumptions based on the specimen's lack of obvious technological adaptations." "Reasonable assumptions," the Queen repeated, her tone indicating she found nothing reasonable about them at all. "You have presented a sentient being as an animal for public entertainment, charging admission for visitors to mock what you believe to be a primitive creature." The implications of her words sent a ripple of unease through the crowd that had gathered to watch this unexpected drama. Several alien species had strict laws about the treatment of sentient beings, and what the Zephyrians had been doing could be considered a form of slavery. Marcus seized the moment. "Your Majesty, I was a stellar cartographer aboard the research vessel Endeavor when we were attacked by raiders. My escape pod was picked up by Zephyrian salvagers who chose to sell me to this facility rather than contact my government or follow standard protocols for rescued spacers." The Queen's ears flattened against her head, a sign of growing anger that even Marcus could interpret. "Curator HFY, you have exactly 1 standard minute to explain why my intelligence services should not investigate your facility for violations of the Galactic Sentience Accords." The curator's tentacles were now moving in frantic patterns that Marcus recognized as either panic or preparation for flight. "Your Majesty, please understand we are a legitimate research and educational facility. If there were any administrative errors, they were certainly unintentional." "Administrative errors?" The Queen's voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "You have an entire section of your facility dedicated to displaying what you call primitive species. How many other sentient beings are you keeping as attractions?" This question caused a visible wave of discomfort among the menagerie staff. Marcus noticed several of them exchanging nervous glances, and the curator's attempt at a confident response fell flat. "All of our specimens are obtained through legitimate channels," HFY insisted. "We follow all applicable regulations for the care and display of non-sentient life forms." The Queen turned back to Marcus, studying him with renewed interest. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chen, Your Majesty. Dr. Marcus Chen, if titles matter here." "They do indeed, Dr. Chen." She emphasized the title deliberately. "I am Queen Lyrily of the Vulpine Stellar Confederation. Tell me, what exactly were you researching when you were captured?" Marcus felt a surge of hope. The Vulpine Confederation was one of the more progressive galactic powers, known for their technological advancement and fair treatment of other species. If he could convince her to intervene, he might finally escape this nightmare. We were mapping gravitational anomalies in the Kepler Nebula, specifically investigating reports of unusual space-time distortions that could indicate the presence of ancient technology or natural phenomena with military applications. The Queen's ears perked forward with obvious interest. Ancient technology? Possibly. The distortion patterns didn't match anything in our databases. We were 3 days into detailed surveys when the raiders hit us. Marcus paused, remembering the violence of that attack. My ship's AI managed to get me to an escape pod, but the Endeavor and her crew of 37 were lost. A new voice interrupted from behind the Queen. Your Majesty, if this human speaks truth about military applications, the Confederation's Science Division would be most interested in his research. Marcus looked past the Queen to see a figure in elaborate robes, clearly some kind of advisor or court official. The alien's features were hidden beneath a hood, but its voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. Queen Lyralee nodded thoughtfully. Indeed, Minister Cross, Dr. Chen. Would you be willing to share your research with Confederation scientists in exchange for your freedom? Your Majesty, I would be honored to assist the Confederation in any way possible, Marcus replied immediately. Though I should mention that the most sensitive data was encrypted and stored in my personal neural implant. It would take some specialized equipment to extract it safely. The Queen smiled, and this time it was entirely predatory as she turned back to the curator. How fortunate that the Confederation maintains excellent neurotechnology facilities. Curator Vexai, you will immediately transfer custody of Dr. Chen to my authority under Section 7 of the Sentience Protection Act. But Your Majesty, the paperwork alone will take weeks and there are fees. And permits, the curator began desperately. Or, the Queen's voice cut through his protests like a blade. I can have my security forces investigate how many other violations of galactic law your facility has committed. I suspect a thorough audit might find your business model somewhat difficult to sustain. The curator deflated visibly, his tentacles drooping in defeat. Of course, Your Majesty. We live to serve the Confederation's interests. The transfer can be arranged immediately. Marcus felt a surge of relief so intense it was almost overwhelming. After 3 months of captivity, degradation, and being treated like an animal, he was finally going to be free. But as he looked at Queen Lyralee's confident smile and intelligent eyes, he wondered if he was simply trading one form of captivity for another, albeit a far more pleasant one. The transformation from captive specimen to honored guest happened with bewildering speed. Within 2 hours, Marcus found himself aboard Queen Lyralee's personal flagship, the Starfire's Grace, wearing clean clothes that actually fit him, and sitting across from the Queen herself in an elegantly appointed diplomatic suite. The contrast with his zoo cell was so stark that he wondered if he was dreaming. I apologize for the crude accommodations, Queen Lyralee said, gesturing to the luxurious cabin around them. My flagship isn't equipped with proper guest quarters for extended voyages. I hope these temporary arrangements will suffice until we reach Vulpus Prime. Marcus almost laughed at the casual way she described what was easily the finest living space he had occupied in his entire life. The cabin was larger than his apartment back on Earth, with real wood furnishings, crystal windows showing the starfield outside, and amenities that bordered on the decadent. Your Majesty, after 3 months in a zoo cage, this is paradise, he said honestly. I can't express how grateful I am for your intervention. The Queen's ears flicked, and what he was learning was amusement. Please call me Lyralee when we're speaking privately. Royal protocols can be exhausting when overdone. She settled back in her chair, studying him with those penetrating golden eyes. Now, Dr. Chen, I must admit that rescuing you from the menagerie wasn't entirely altruistic. Marcus had suspected as much. In his experience, even the most benevolent rulers rarely acted without considering potential benefits. The research data, he said simply. Partly, yes. The Confederation is always interested in advancing our scientific understanding, particularly regarding gravitational anomalies. But there's something else. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. The Vulpine Confederation has been monitoring human expansion into this sector of space for some time now. Your species has proven to be remarkably adaptable and innovative. This was news to Marcus. Human contact with the major galactic powers had been limited, mostly through trade agreements and formal diplomatic exchanges. The idea that they were being actively studied was both flattering and somewhat concerning. "What kind of monitoring?" he asked. "Nothing invasive," Lyreley assured him quickly. "But when a new spacefaring species appears and begins establishing colonies at the rate humans have managed, the established powers tend to take notice. Your people have accomplished in 2 centuries what took most species millennia." Marcus felt a surge of pride despite himself. "We're curious by nature, I suppose, and perhaps a bit stubborn when it comes to obstacles. More than a bit from what our intelligence suggests." The Queen's smile suggested she found this trait admirable rather than concerning. "Your species has a reputation for solving problems in ways that other races would consider impossible or inadvisable." "Such as?" "Well, for instance, most species avoid systems with unstable stars or dangerous gravitational fields. Humans seem to view them as challenges to overcome. Your colony on Kepler 438b shouldn't be viable according to conventional wisdom. Yet your people have not only survived there, but turned it into a thriving research station." Marcus nodded. He had visited Kepler 438b several times, and it was indeed a harsh world orbiting a temperamental star. But human stubbornness and engineering had turned it into one of the most productive astrophysics laboratories in known space. "This brings me to why I was at the menagerie today," Lyreley continued. "I wasn't there as a tourist. I was investigating reports of illegal sentient trafficking, but I never expected to find a human among the exhibits." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You knew what the Zephyrians were doing?" "Suspected. We've been tracking several criminal organizations that specialize in capturing and selling members of species that aren't well represented in galactic politics. Humans, being relatively new to the interstellar community, make attractive targets." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. "How many others are there?" "How many humans have been taken?" "We don't know for certain. That's part of what we're investigating." Lyreley's expression grew serious. "This is where your expertise becomes valuable beyond just the gravitational research. You've experienced their operations firsthand. Your testimony could help us shut down the entire network." The cabin fell silent as Marcus processed this information. The idea that his capture might not have been an isolated incident was deeply disturbing. But it also presented an opportunity to strike back at the creatures who had humiliated and dehumanized him. "What would you need from me?" he asked. "Everything you can remember about your capture, the facilities where you were held, the people involved. We'll also want to extract and analyze your research data, both for its scientific value and because it might provide clues about why you were targeted specifically." Marcus nodded slowly. "The raiders who attacked my ship seemed to know exactly what they were looking for. They bypassed our cargo holds and went straight for the research labs and the bridge. It felt more like a targeted strike than a random piracy operation." Lyreley's ears perked forward with interest. "You think they were after your research specifically?" "It's possible. The gravitational anomalies we were studying could have military applications if they're artificial in origin, ancient weapons, cloaking technology, faster-than-light travel methods we haven't discovered yet." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, thinking back to those last desperate moments aboard the Endeavor. "There's something else, too. The raiders weren't just any species. They were Kethmori." The Queen's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Her ears flattened against her head, and her lips pulled back to reveal sharp canine teeth. "Kethmori? You're certain?" "I saw them during the boarding action. Unmistakable bioarmor, those distinctive energy weapons, the way they moved in perfect coordination. It was definitely the Kethmori hegemony." This information seemed to transform the entire conversation. Lyreley stood and began pacing the cabin, her tail lashing behind her in obvious agitation. If the hegemony is targeting human research expeditions, this situation is far more serious than we realized. Marcus had heard of the Kethmori hegemony. Though human contact with them had been extremely limited, they were described as a militant species with advanced technology and expansionist tendencies, the kind of neighbors that made everyone else nervous. "Your Majesty, Lyreley, what aren't you telling me?" Marcus asked quietly. The Queen stopped pacing and fixed him with a steady gaze. "Dr. Chen, I'm afraid your rescue from the menagerie was only the beginning. If the hegemony is actively targeting human research operations, then your people are in far more danger than they realize. And you might be the key to preventing a war that could consume half the galaxy. Outside the crystal windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the political machinations of the species that traveled between them. But Marcus could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, heavier than the artificial gravity that kept him anchored to the deck. The neural extraction chamber aboard the Starfire's Grace was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Crystal matrices hummed with energy, while holographic displays showed complex brain patterns in 3 dimensions. Vulpine technicians moved with practiced efficiency, calibrating equipment that could have come from humanity's most optimistic science fiction. The process is entirely painless, Dr. Veltar assured him, her fox-like features creased with professional concern. We'll create a complete backup of the encrypted data while leaving your personal memories intact. Think of it as making a copy rather than transferring files. Marcus lay back on the examination platform, trying to appear calmer than he felt. And you're certain this won't damage the encryption? Our quantum neural interfaces are specifically designed to work with biological storage systems, Queen Lyrelei said from where she observed the proceedings. We've successfully extracted data from 17 different species without a single incident. The procedure took 3 hours. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness while machines mapped every neural pathway connected to his research memories. When he finally awoke, Dr. Veltar was studying readouts with obvious excitement. Remarkable, she breathed, turning to address the Queen. Your Majesty, the human brain architecture is far more sophisticated than our preliminary studies suggested. The data encryption is integrated at a cellular level that would be impossible to detect without advanced scanning. What does that mean? Marcus asked, sitting up carefully. It means your people are paranoid in the most admirable way possible, Lyrelei replied with what might have been approval. This level of biological data security suggests that humans have encountered hostile intelligence before. Marcus thought about humanity's history of warfare and espionage. We have a saying, trust but verify. When it comes to sensitive information, we tend to emphasize the verification part. The Queen's laugh was genuinely delighted. I'm beginning to understand why the hegemony views your species as a threat. Dr. Chen, the preliminary analysis of your research data is extraordinary. A holographic display materialized above them, showing Marcus's gravitational readings from the Kepler Nebula. The familiar patterns brought back memories of those last peaceful days aboard the Endeavour. Before everything went wrong. These distortion signatures, Dr. Veltar indicated specific wavelength patterns. They're not natural phenomena. Someone or something created artificial gravity wells in that region of space. Marcus studied the data with fresh eyes, seeing patterns he had missed during his original analysis. The energy requirements would be enormous. What could generate this kind of gravitational manipulation? That's what concerns us, Lyrelei said grimly. We've encountered similar signatures before, during archaeological surveys of ancient battlefields. These patterns match technology used by the predecessors. The name sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Every spacefaring species had legends about the predecessors, an ancient civilization that had supposedly vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind artifacts of incomprehensible power. Most scholars considered them mythology, but the evidence was becoming harder to dismiss. You think the hegemony is searching for predecessor technology? Marcus asked. We think they've already found some, the Queen replied. 3 months ago, Keth Mori forces launched simultaneous attacks on 6 different archaeological sites across 3 sectors. They weren't random raids. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Dr. Veltar manipulated the holographic display, overlaying Marcus's research data with star charts showing the locations of the hegemony attacks. The correlation was undeniable. Every target showed similar gravitational anomalies to what Marcus had discovered. Your research expedition wasn't attacked by chance, Lyrelei continued. The hegemony has been systematically eliminating anyone who might interfere with their search for predecessor sites. They just never expected one of their targets to survive and end up in a position to expose their activities. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. 37 people had died aboard the Endeavour. Good scientists and crew members who had joined the expedition out of curiosity and dedication to knowledge. To learn they had been murdered as part of some alien power grab was almost unbearable. What do you need from me? He asked, his voice steady despite the rage burning inside him. Everything, the Queen said simply. Your government needs to be warned about the hegemony threat, but more importantly, we need to find these predecessor sites before the Kethmori do. Your research provides the only reliable method we have for detecting artificial gravitational signatures. There's something else, Dr. Veltar added, highlighting a specific section of the data. Dr. Chen, when you were analyzing these readings, did you notice any patterns that seemed almost familiar? As if you had encountered something similar before? Marcus studied the indicated wavelengths, feeling an odd sensation of recognition tickle at the edges of his consciousness. Actually, yes. There was something about the harmonic frequencies that reminded me of Earth's magnetic field during solar storm activity, but amplified by several orders of magnitude. The Vulpine scientists exchanged meaningful glances. Dr. Chen, Lyreley said carefully, has your species ever conducted experiments with artificial gravity generation? Nothing beyond theoretical research. We have some small-scale laboratory demonstrations, but the energy requirements for anything practical are beyond our current capabilities. Marcus paused, understanding dawning on him. Unless you're suggesting that humans have encountered predecessor technology before? Not encountered, Dr. Veltar said excitedly. Inherited. Dr. Chen, the gravitational patterns you detected match readings we've taken from Earth's solar system. Your people aren't just studying predecessor technology. You're living in the middle of it. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If Earth itself was somehow connected to the predecessors, then humanity's rapid technological development, their unusual adaptability, even their aggressive expansion into space might all be explained. That's impossible, he said automatically. But even as the words left his mouth, he was thinking about humanity's inexplicable technological leaps, the way human intuition seemed to work with certain types of physics that baffled other species. Is it? Lyreley asked gently. Your people developed faster than light travel independently, something that took other species thousands of years of shared knowledge to achieve. You've established colonies and systems that other races consider uninhabitable. You solve problems in ways that seem to violate conventional logic. Marcus thought about the myths and legends of his own world, stories of ancient technologies and lost civilizations that had shaped human development. What if they weren't myths at all? If this is true, he said slowly, then the hegemony isn't just after random predecessor sites. They're positioning themselves to move against Earth. The Queen's ears flattened against her head in a gesture Marcus now recognized as deep concern. Dr. Chen, I'm afraid that's exactly what we think they're planning. And if they succeed in claiming humanity's homeworld, they'll have access to predecessor technology that could make them unstoppable. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the quantum processors analyzing data that might determine the fate of civilizations. Marcus stared at the holographic display showing his home system, wondering if he was looking at the next battlefield in a war that had been brewing for millions of years. The War Council chamber aboard the Starfire's Grace buzzed with tension as representatives from 6 different species gathered around a holographic star map. Marcus found himself seated at Queen Lyreley's right hand, a position of honor that still felt surreal after months of captivity. The assembled delegates represented the core worlds of the Galactic Cooperation Treaty, but their expression suggested cooperation might be harder to achieve than the treaty's name implied. The evidence is compelling, Admiral Thisica of the Aquari Federation said, his translated voice carrying skeptical undertones. But you're asking us to believe that humans have been unknowingly sitting on the greatest archaeological treasure in galactic history. Not unknowingly, corrected Dr. Veltar, manipulating the holographic display to show comparative gravitational readings. Human technological development shows clear signs of predecessor influence. Their faster-than-light drives use principles that shouldn't be discoverable without direct exposure to advanced gravitational manipulation. Representative Zixanath of the Silicon Collective chimed in with electronic harmonics. Query: if humans possess predecessor technology, why have they not achieved dominance over local space? Marcus decided it was time to speak up. Because we don't possess it in any meaningful sense. We've been unconsciously influenced by it, adapted to work with it, but we don't understand it. It's like a child using a computer without understanding how processors work. That may be changing, Queen Lyreley said, activating a new section of the display. Our intelligence operatives have confirmed that Kethmori forces are massing in 3 different sectors, all positioned to strike at human colonies simultaneously. They're not just planning raids anymore. This is preparation for total conquest. The crystalline ambassador, whose name was an unpronounceable series of harmonic tones, spoke through a translation matrix. The hegemony has been increasingly aggressive in recent cycles. Our border stations report unusual movement patterns in their fleet deployments. Admiral Thisica leaned forward, his aquatic features betraying concern. How long do we estimate before they move? Weeks, possibly days, Lyra Lee replied grimly. Dr. Chen's escape from their trafficking network has likely accelerated their timeline. They know we're aware of their activities. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders again. His rescue had potentially doomed his entire species to face invasion before they were prepared. What can we do? Human space forces are advanced but small. We have maybe 100 proper warships scattered across dozens of systems. Which brings us to the real purpose of this meeting, the Queen said. The cooperation treaty includes mutual defense clauses, but they've never been invoked for a non-member species. You want us to go to war to protect humans? Representative Zix Noth's electronic voice carried what might have been disbelief. Our species barely know each other. We want you to go to war to prevent the Kethamori hegemony from acquiring technology that could dominate the entire galaxy, Lyra Lee corrected sharply. If they gain control of Earth and learn to properly utilize predecessor gravitational manipulation, every species in this room becomes a potential target. This argument seemed to carry more weight with the assembled delegates. The Silicon Collective's representative made rapid calculations before speaking again. Analysis: the probability of hegemony expansion following successful human conquest approaches 93% based on historical patterns. Admiral Thisica was studying tactical displays showing human space. Their colonies are spread across a wide area. Defending them all simultaneously would require significant fleet commitments from multiple species. Not necessarily, Marcus interjected, an idea forming as he studied the star charts. Human space isn't as defenseless as it looks. We've been preparing for potential conflict since we first made contact with galactic civilization. He stood and approached the holographic display, highlighting specific systems. Our colonies aren't just settlements. They're fortified research stations with experimental weapon systems. We've been testing theoretical physics and practical applications for decades. Dr. Veltar looked intrigued. What kind of experimental weapons? Gravitational pulse generators, quantum disruption fields, dimensional fold missiles. Most of them are still in prototype stages. But if the hegemony is expecting to face conventional space forces, they're going to get some nasty surprises. Queen Lyra Lee's ears perked forward with obvious interest. You have functional gravitational weapons? Limited functionality, Marcus admitted. But the Kepler station incident 3 years ago proved that human intuition works remarkably well, with gravitational manipulation. What would take other species years of calculations, human engineers can sometimes accomplish through what we call educated guessing. The crystalline ambassador's harmonic tones suggested amazement. This confirms the predecessor influence theory. Such intuitive understanding of complex physics is not natural development. Natural or not, it's what we have, Marcus said. The question is whether we can coordinate human defensive capabilities with allied fleet actions quickly enough to matter. Admiral Thisica was already running tactical simulations. If human colonies can hold defensive positions long enough for our combined fleets to arrive, we might be able to turn this from a conquest into a trap. There's another consideration, Lyra Lee added. Dr. Chen, if Earth really is the center of a predecessor installation, then defending it successfully could give us access to technology that would shift the balance of power permanently. Marcus thought about his homeworld, blue and green and beautiful in its orbital dance around an ordinary yellow star. The idea that Earth might be some kind of ancient alien artifact was still difficult to process, but the evidence was becoming overwhelming. What do you need from me? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We need you to go home, the Queen said simply. Your people need to be warned, and they need someone who understands the true scope of the threat they're facing. But more than that, we need you to help coordinate the defense with someone who truly understands how human technology interfaces with predecessor systems. Representative. Zix-Noth's electronic harmonics carried a note of urgency. Time factor critical. Kethamori fleet movements suggest attack initiation within 72 standard hours. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the situation settled over everyone present. In 3 days, the most aggressive military power in known space would launch an assault designed to claim the greatest archaeological treasure in galactic history. Success would make them unstoppable. Failure might be humanity's first step toward becoming a true galactic power. Marcus looked around the table at the assembled delegates. Representatives of species that had barely known humans existed a few days ago, now preparing to risk their own fleets to defend his people. The irony wasn't lost on him that his rescue from being displayed as a primitive specimen had led to humanity potentially becoming the most important species in the galaxy. "When do we leave?" he asked Queen Lyrelai. Her smile was fierce and predatory. "We don't. You're taking my fastest courier ship with a full diplomatic escort. The Confederation fleet will follow within hours of your departure." As the meeting dissolved into tactical planning and logistical coordination, Marcus found himself staring at the holographic representation of Earth. In 72 hours, his homeworld would either stand as a symbol of galactic cooperation or fall as the first conquest in a new age of empire. The former zoo exhibit turned out to be humanity's best hope for survival. The courier ship Phoenix's flight tore through hyperspace at velocities that made Marcus's teeth ache. Vulpine engineering had pushed the boundaries of faster-than-light travel beyond what human science considered possible, but the ship was paying for it in stressed hull plates and overheating drive systems. They had 18 hours to reach Earth before the Kethmori hegemony launched their assault. "Dr. Chen, incoming transmission from Earth Defense Command," announced Lieutenant Kesara, the ship's communications officer. Her Vulpine features were tense with concentration as she worked to maintain the hyperspace link. "They're demanding identification and explaining why we're approaching Sol system at combat velocities." Marcus moved to the communication station, his diplomatic credentials ready. The sight of Earth's familiar blue-white marble growing larger on the view screen filled him with emotions he hadn't expected. After 4 months of captivity and revelation, his homeworld looked both precious and impossibly vulnerable. "Earth Defense. This is Dr. Marcus Chen, serial number ADR 7749 Alpha, returning aboard a Vulpine Confederation diplomatic vessel, with critical intelligence regarding imminent attack on human space." He paused, knowing his next words would sound insane to whoever was receiving them. "I need immediate patch-through to Admiral Martinez at Strategic Command." The response came back with barely controlled skepticism. "Dr. Chen, according to our records, you were listed as missing and presumed dead 4 months ago when the research vessel Endeavor was destroyed. Please explain your current situation and why you're traveling with an alien diplomatic escort." "Earth Defense, this is going to sound unbelievable, but I was captured by slave traders, sold to an alien zoo, and rescued by Queen Lyrelai of the Vulpine Confederation. Right now at Kethmori, Hegemony Battle Fleet is approximately 18 hours behind us with orders to conquer Earth and claim predecessor. Technology that we apparently don't know we have." The silence that followed stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if the transmission had been lost. Finally, a different voice came through the communicator, older and carrying the authority of high command. "Marcus, this is Admiral Martinez. Son, you've been officially dead for months." "Where the hell have you been?" Relief flooded through Marcus at hearing a familiar voice. Admiral Rodriguez Martinez had been his commanding officer during his stint with the Defense Research Division. And more importantly, she was one of the few people who might actually believe his story. "Admiral, it's a very long story that I'll be happy to tell you over dinner sometime. But right now we have maybe 6 hours before the most advanced military force in the galaxy shows up to take over our planet. I need you to activate the Prometheus protocols immediately." Another pause, shorter this time. "Marcus, the Prometheus protocols are theoretical. Half the technology they require doesn't even exist yet." "Ma'am, with respect, all of our technology exists. We just haven't been using it properly. I have 4 months of research data that proves human technology has been unconsciously incorporating predecessor physics since we first achieved spaceflight. The experimental gravitational systems, the quantum disruption experiments, even our faster-than-light drives, it's all based on principles that shouldn't be discoverable through normal research." Lieutenant Kesara looked up from her console with excitement. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving additional transmissions from multiple human colonies. It looks like your military command is implementing emergency protocols across your entire space." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Whatever else humans might lack in terms of galactic political experience, They had always excelled at rapid military mobilization when faced with existential threats. Admiral, what's our current defensive posture? Every colony with a population over 10,000 is activating their experimental weapons arrays, Admiral Martinez replied. The Luna shipyards are pushing 3 new dreadnoughts through accelerated completion schedules, and we've got every available ship converging on Earth. But Marcus, even with our best estimates, we're looking at maybe 200 vessels total against what your alien friends are saying could be a 1,000-ship invasion force. Ma'am, it's not about the numbers, Marcus said, his confidence growing as he thought about the implications of everything he had learned. The Kethamori are expecting to face a primitive species with basic technology. They don't know about the Kepler incident or the gravitational pulse weapons, or the fact that human pilots seem to have an intuitive understanding of space-time manipulation that violates every known law of physics education. Queen Lyrelai's voice came from behind him as she entered the communication bay. Admiral Martinez, this is Queen Lyrelai of the Vulpine Confederation. Dr. Chen is being modest about your species' capabilities. In the past day, our scientists have analyzed human technology and found innovations that our most advanced researchers considered impossible. Your Majesty, this is an unexpected honor, Admiral Martinez replied, her voice carrying the careful respect of a career military officer addressing foreign royalty. What kind of support can we expect from the Confederation? Admiral, we have a battle fleet 3 hours behind Dr. Chen's courier ship, with additional forces from 5 allied species en route. But the real question is whether your people can hold defensive positions long enough for us to coordinate a joint response. Marcus could hear the smile in Admiral Martinez's voice. Your Majesty, humans have been preparing for alien invasion scenarios since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back. If the Kethamori want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. There's something else, Marcus added, studying the tactical displays Lieutenant Kesara was showing him. Admiral, the gravitational readings from Earth system match predecessor signatures I detected in the Kepler Nebula. Our entire solar system might be one massive ancient installation. This revelation was met with stunned silence from Earth Defense Command. Finally, Admiral Martinez spoke again, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and determination. Marcus, are you saying that Earth itself is an alien artifact? Not exactly, ma'am. More like Earth developed in the middle of an ancient alien construction project that's been influencing our evolution for millions of years. The good news is that it means human technology should interface with predecessor systems better than anyone expects. The bad news is that if the Kethamori capture Earth, they'll have access to technology that could make them masters of the galaxy. Queen Lyrelai moved to the tactical display, highlighting the approaching Confederation forces. Admiral Martinez, our combined fleets will arrive approximately 2 hours after the hegemony attack begins. Your people need to hold the line until then. Understood, Your Majesty. Dr. Chen, when you get down here, report directly to Strategic Command. We're going to need every advantage we can get, and you're the only human who's seen how their technology works. As the Phoenix's flight dropped out of hyperspace and Earth grew large on the view screen, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders one final time. In a few hours, his homeworld would face its greatest test. The species that had mocked him as a primitive exhibit was about to learn what humans could accomplish when their survival was on the line. The irony wasn't lost on him that his captivity in an alien zoo had led him to become the key to humanity's defense against extinction. Sometimes the galaxy had a very strange sense of humor. The Strategic Command Center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, hummed with activity as Marcus arrived via emergency transport. The massive holographic displays showed the approaching Kethamori fleet in terrifying detail. Over 800 vessels arranged in perfect formation, advancing on Earth with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Martinez greeted him with a mixture of relief and grim determination. Marcus, good to have you back among the living. I hope you brought some good news because our tactical analysis isn't encouraging. Marcus studied the enemy formation, noting the precision of their approach vectors and the sheer size of their capital ships. Admiral, they're expecting easy conquest. Look at their deployment. It's optimized for occupation and resource extraction, not for fighting a determined defense. That's what worries our tacticians, she replied, highlighting sections of the enemy fleet. They wouldn't approach with such confidence unless they believed victory was inevitable. Ma'am, they've never fought humans before. They've analyzed our technology based on standard galactic assumptions, But human engineering doesn't follow standard patterns. Marcus moved to the central display, calling up technical specifications. Have the Prometheus protocols been fully activated? As of 2 hours ago, every major colony has armed their experimental weapon systems, and Luna Base has successfully brought their gravitational pulse cannon online ahead of schedule. Admiral Martinez paused, studying readouts from across human space. Marcus, some of these systems are performing beyond their theoretical parameters. The Titan station reports their quantum disruption field is generating effects that their own engineers can't explain. Marcus felt a surge of excitement. That's exactly what I hoped would happen. Admiral, human intuition has been unconsciously adapting to work with predecessor technology for generations. Under combat stress with our survival on the line, those adaptations should become even more pronounced. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Kethmori fleet, announced the duty officer. Put it through, Admiral Martinez ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a Kethmori commander, his bioarmor gleaming with energy conduits and weapon systems. His translated voice carried the arrogance of absolute certainty. Primitive humans, I am War Leader Vexthal of the Kethmori hegemony. You will surrender your worlds and submit to hegemony authority. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. Admiral Martinez stepped forward, her bearing radiating the confidence that had made her one of Earth's most respected military leaders. War Leader Vexthal, this is Admiral Rodriguez Martinez of Earth Defense Command. We decline your generous offer. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them. The Kethmori commander's expression shifted to what might have been amusement. Admiral, your species possesses approximately 200 vessels against our 800. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. This will not be a battle but an extermination. War Leader, you're about to learn something important about humans, Marcus said, stepping into view of the communication pickup. We don't fight fair, we don't give up, and we get very creative when someone threatens our home. Recognition flickered across the alien commander's features. The missing human from the research vessel. Your escape has merely accelerated our timeline, Primitive. Soon you will rejoin your species in extinction. Actually, Marcus said with a smile that had learned some predatory qualities during his time with Queen Lyrelai, I think you're the one who's about to get an education. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Admiral Martinez turned to Marcus with raised eyebrows. I hope you have a plan to back up that confidence. Before Marcus could respond, alerts began cascading across every display in the room. The Kethmori fleet had opened fire, their advanced weapons reaching across impossible distances to strike at human defensive positions. But instead of the expected devastation, something extraordinary began to happen. The experimental gravitational pulse weapons that human engineers had barely understood suddenly began operating with perfect efficiency. Quantum disruption fields that should have been unstable created perfectly contained zones of twisted space-time. Most remarkably, human pilots began executing maneuvers that violated basic physics, their fighters dancing through enemy fire patterns as if they instinctively knew where each shot would be. Admiral, this is Luna Base, came an excited voice over the communication system. Our gravitational cannon just achieved a direct hit on a hegemony dreadnought. The target vessel appears to be folding in on itself. Similar reports flooded in from across human space. The experimental weapon systems that had been theoretical curiosities were performing like mature technology in the hands of desperate human defenders. More importantly, the defenders themselves seemed to be adapting in real time to capabilities they hadn't known they possessed. Marcus watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. Admiral, it's working even better than I hoped. Look at the Kepler station engagement. The holographic display showed human fighters weaving through a formation of Kethmori cruisers, their movement patterns creating interference effects that shouldn't be possible with conventional technology. As Marcus watched, one of the human pilots seemed to intuitively understand how to modulate his ship's drive field to create a gravitational shear that tore an enemy vessel in half. How are they doing that? Admiral Martinez asked in amazement. They're not thinking about it, Marcus replied. Human pilots have always had exceptional spatial awareness and reaction times. Now they're unconsciously accessing computational abilities that have been dormant in our neural architecture since we evolved in Earth's gravitational environment. The Kethmori formation was beginning to show signs of confusion as their carefully planned assault met resistance that defied their understanding of human capabilities. War Leader Vexthal's voice crackled over the communication channels, demanding explanations from his subordinates for the unexpected effectiveness of primitive weapons. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Vulpine Confederation fleet," announced the duty officer. Queen Lyralee's image appeared on the display, her expression fierce with battle excitement. "Admiral Martinez, Dr. Chen, the combined Allied fleet is dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. How are your defenses holding?" "Better than anyone expected, Your Majesty," Admiral Martinez replied. "Our people are fighting like they were born to use this technology." "Perhaps they were," the Queen said with satisfaction. "War Leader Vexthal, this is Queen Lyralee of the Vulpine Confederation. You are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately, or face the consequences of attacking a species under galactic protection." The Kethmori commander's response was predictable. "Queen Lyralee, the hegemony recognizes no authority over primitive species. Your interference will be noted and addressed appropriately." "I was hoping you'd say that," Lyralee replied, her smile showing far too many sharp teeth. The next few hours would be remembered as the Battle of Sol, though historians would debate for generations whether it should be classified as humanity's first galactic war, or simply the largest miscalculation in military history. The Kethmori hegemony had expected to conquer a primitive species with basic technology. Instead, they found themselves facing the unconscious inheritors of predecessor physics, supported by the combined fleets of half the galaxy's major powers. When the battle finally ended, nearly 600 Kethmori vessels had been destroyed or captured. The remaining 200 limped back toward hegemony space carrying news that would reshape galactic politics forever. Humans were no longer an unknown quantity on the galactic stage. They were a force that demanded respect. Marcus stood in the Strategic Command Center, watching as Allied ships from a dozen species maintained patrol orbits around Earth. Queen Lyralee had kept her word about galactic protection, and humanity had proven they deserved it. "So what happens now?" Admiral Martinez asked, studying the diplomatic messages flooding in from across known space. "Now we find out what else we've been unconsciously inheriting from the predecessors," Marcus said, thinking about the implications of human neural architecture that could interface with technology millions of years more advanced than anything they had built themselves. "And Dr. Chen," Admiral Martinez added with a grin, "next time you go on a research expedition, try not to get yourself kidnapped by alien slave traders." Marcus laughed, remembering his time as a zoo exhibit, and thinking about how spectacularly wrong his captors had been about human capabilities. "Admiral, I think I'll stick to diplomatic missions for a while. Being a primitive specimen was educational, but I prefer being on the side that wins." Outside the command center, Earth continued its ancient orbit around a yellow star, no longer an isolated world but the newest member of a galactic community that was still trying to understand what humanity's presence would mean for the future. The species that had once been mocked as primitives had become the key to unlocking secrets that had been buried for millions of years. And in the depths of space, gravitational anomalies that had puzzled scientists for generations began to pulse with new activity. As if ancient systems were finally awakening,